The soprano. Who best to start that conversation?
And who best to be singing the aria?
Yes. Song to the Moon of Rusalka. Lyric soprano voice is considered to be the most ubiquitous, the most common and oftenly found voice in the repertoire, and in human beings, in fact. And in my experience, it hasn't really been the case. Fortunately for me, I suppose. But she is at the center of a woman's spectrum, I would say, of vocal types. And there's so many different kinds. But I think of what I can sing comfortably is repertoire that is a suppleness, a femininity to it, not a heroic, not an edge or a kind of stentorian quality ever. She is so often the victim in opera. She is so often the heroine in the respect that she is the one that the audience sympathizes with. And we always have to talk about vocal quality because it's not range. You know, mezzos, lyric mezzos, and dramatic sopranos all have the same range, pretty much. It's more about the sound.
Yes, the quality of the voice and the color, particularly, and differences in the different registers probably. But
yes, and weight.
Yes.
How much weight there is in the voice. How can we be heard over? What kind of orchestration can we heard over?
To which the dramatic soprano is the greatest possible contrast, I suppose. That
at one extreme, and then the coloratura soprano is a contrast at the other extreme.
That's
so
right.
We have the lyric soprano is very much the central ground, as you say, conveying femininity, conveying vocal warmth, vocal beauty.
Yes.
A finesse and elegance, usually. No lack of complexity. If one thinks of the character Blanche in Streetcar,
right.
Lyric sopranos are not always stable mentally.
No. Yes.
And their music can reflect that mental instability.
Well, it's interesting to discuss the whole categorization of singers because the repertoire is 300 years old plus. And the styles of writing are so incredibly varied. I mean, and even within lyric soprano, I sang a lot of lyrico spinto repertoire, which is that slightly heavier. And I also sang a lyric soprano repertoire that had fioritura in it, that was leggero. And
give us examples of both.
Well, for my repertoire, I would say goes from the heaviest Slavic repertoire, which would be Tatiana Onegin, to 9 bel canto roles that I sang, which have the most extreme range and the most extreme vocal requirements because of the movement, the coloratura. And they all have in common, however, again, they're very often younger women. I get to play the ingenue most of the time. That's becoming a stretch, but never mind. And they're also, I can't sing over a heavy orchestration. So that's a real consideration. And where I'm also, lyric soprano cannot do that is in the middle voice. We don't have the strongest, loudest middle voice. So there are many refined differentiations between the voice types.
And of the roles that you sing, would you say Tatiana is the heaviest?
I would say it's at the heaviest. There have been dramatic repertoire. I mean, Armida of Rossini, which is a bel canto role, but because of her nature, because she's a seductress and a sorceress, it challenges me, and it's heavy in the mid-register again. But we have to also kind of figure out, well, how do you judge a great soprano? And it is the sort of evenness of tone, the uniqueness of timbre.
Yes,
is incredibly important. Pitch. I mean, these are anybody coming to the opera can hear these things probably.
And that's how you judge any singer.
Any singer, that's right.
And in a way, to me, what is so interesting, I've sat on many singing competition juries over the years, and when you're trying to compare, for example, a lyric soprano with a bass, what are you listening for? And for me, what I'm listening for is an ability to communicate emotionally.
Yes.
It's what the individual component parts that you've outlined, vocal quality, pitch, verbal precision, musicality, it all has to add up to something.
Plus you can be a great musician and not be musical. I mean, can you describe that a little bit? I find that very interesting.
You can be a great
and
musician.
vice versa. There are famous singers who couldn't read music.
Oh yes, of course.
Who were
absolutely
brilliantly musical.
That's right. And then people who have a lot of have had a lot of musical training doesn't necessarily make the musical either.
Yes.
The quality of being musical is just, it's something that you obviously have to refine, but there's a basic instinct, I think, for
knowing how to turn
creating
a
a
phrase.
musical phrase that
Yes.
You either have or you don't.
You want to break hearts, ultimately.
Well, lyric
That's-
sopranos seem
Yes.
to be the heartbreakers.
Yeah, we're trying, we're attempting. But dramatic sopranos, what they have to manage in terms of physical stamina and physical strength often completely floors me, because the power required of a dramatic soprano and the drama also, and they go hand in hand, don't they?
They do, and the vocal arsenal that a dramatic soprano needs in terms of stamina, in terms of range,
Yes.
in much of the repertoire, most of the weight has to be in the middle of the voice. One
Right.
thinks of the great Wagner soprano parts like Brünnhilde and Isolde. Actually, it's the soprano's middle register that really counts in those parts. But then every so often
They
have
shoot
to
up into the stratosphere.
and
It
have
has
to
to.
let rip with a gleaming top note.
Right.
That's right.
And the
Right.
voice requires an overdrive
Yes.
that has to lift the roof
Right.
off opera houses.
And in terms of longevity, we're protected to some degree because we're not abusing the instrument in a way that a dramatic soprano can. And the people who do it for a long time really amaze me.
Well, that means they have to be very secure in their techniques and,
Yes.
and also be confident in just the sheer strength of the vocal
Yes.
cords.
One of the fun things that's been happening is that people are compiling on YouTube all kinds of versions. I mean, you can find on YouTube my voice recorded from my lowest pitch to my highest pitch in a couple of different versions. And each pitch is from another track. So it's fascinating. And not that I'm sitting there studying it, but I'm thinking, oh boy, did I sing all that? And then the other thing you can go, I did this recently on YouTube and said high notes, soprano high notes. And sure enough, video clips came up of 20 of the top recorded sopranos in the last, 60 years singing high notes. So you could see positioning and resonance and timbre and compare. So if for anybody interested in this subject, a nice couple of hours surfing on YouTube can be a lot of fun.
There's also a danger in being over specific about vocal categories, in that, fine, we can talk about lyric sopranos, dramatic sopranos, coloratura sopranos, but actually it's the individuality of a voice and of an artist that really counts. If you take, for example, a great dramatic soprano like Birgit Nilsson,
Yes.
She also sang Donna Anna,
Yes.
as well as Turandot and Brünnhilde and
Lotte
Isolde.
Lehmann sang Manon all the time, more often than anything, which shocked me when I found that
Precisely.
out. Where does the Fach system come from? What is the genesis of the word
My
Fach?
understanding is that it originates from the German ensemble opera houses, in which all casts were taken from that ensemble, and people were hired to sing certain roles in certain Fachs. And therefore you were the Nuremberg Opera's lyric soprano, and there was a list of roles that as Nuremberg's lyric soprano you would be responsible for singing. And similarly there was a list of dramatic soprano roles, a list of
Yes.
coloratura soprano
A
roles.
job categorization.
Yes, hence the use of the term Fach, which
Yes.
is a German word,
Right.
reflecting the fact that the categorizations of voices, to that extent, originated in the German ensemble system.
See, and I wanted so badly to be a coloratura soprano, or at least a soubrette.
Yes, yes.
And a coloratura soprano who sings the highest notes, Queen of the Night being the most famous. What child has not tried to sing the Queen of the Night aria after hearing it once? And they have, one has said, typically have the shortest careers, but then we have Lily Pons and we have some examples of women who were able to maintain the stratosphere forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another great soprano who transcended categorization was Dame Joan Sutherland,
Yes,
who sang
completely.
well into her 60s,
And could have sung Wagner, in fact.
and at the early part of her career did sing Wagner, sang Eva in Meistersinger,
Really?
sang Aida,
Yes.
and then found a specialization for herself that is what defined
Right.
her career, but was by no means what her career was limited to.
And those roles, and when I started out, Beverly Sills and Joan Sutherland were at the top of that field, but those roles also are the most virtuosic, I would say, for the soprano. They are the fireworks. They're the Olympians of soprano repertoire because they have to sing all of the roulades, the staccati, all of these Italian terms that we use to really describe athletic ability with the voice.
And one of the things that for me makes an artist like Joan Sutherland incredibly special is that she combined that vocal agility with a real weight of voice that you normally don't associate with that repertoire.
That's right.
And it's that combination of vocal warmth and strength and weight combined with agility that added up to something truly extraordinary.
Yeah, that's right. That is very rare in coloratura sopranos, except that, you know, because of that, I actually don't think of Joan Sutherland as a coloratura.
Right.
Although she was. So
Yes.
it means that, you know, the distinctions are
Dramatic
always a little bit
coloratura,
blurred.
maybe, yes.
Yes.
It's true.
And so when she came to record Turandot, which she did famously with Pavarotti as Calaf and Zubin Mehta conducting, she was completely convincing as Turandot. She never sang it on stage, but on record she is sensational as Turandot.
I wish I had heard that live. That would have been amazing. But you'd never call her a bird. I mean, you would never refer to her as
No.
We think of the typical coloratura as a much lighter, brighter sound. It's having that.
Well, and again, it's slightly determined by the repertoire. I mean, you know, the Queen of the Night actually is, you seldom hear with enough strength of voice, actually.
Yes.
But Zerbinetta, for instance, is a character that can be sung by a fairly light voice, but again needs...
The writing is brutal. I don't even know how Strauss came up with that role, because you look at it on a page and you think, who could possibly sing this?
And one of your great roles, Violetta, in Verdi's Traviata, in some ways is written for two completely different singers.
Yes.
Because the Act 1 demands of Sempre Libera are completely different in terms of the coloratura agility and spectacle, vocal spectacle that is required in comparison with the warmth and subtlety of Acts 2 and 3.
Well, and typically whoever is comfortable in Act 1 will not survive very well the rest of the opera, and vice versa. So I typically, when I sang the role, would heave a sigh of relief at the end of Sempre Libera and then enjoy myself for the rest.